Hello and welcome to the Procurement Podcast, brought to you by BizClick and our sponsors for this series, Amazon Business. This is your go-to podcast for all things procurement. If you're ready to move from being a tactical buyer to a strategic leader, you're in the right place. Tune in and together we can build a better bottom line. I'm Aaron McMillan, editor of Procurement Magazine and your host for this podcast series.
Hello and welcome back to the Procurement Magazine podcast. I am your host and senior editor of Procurement Magazine, Aaron McMillan. Our guest today is an experienced transformation and procurement leader with a career spanning strategy, operations, and executive leadership roles. He has led major change initiatives across global organizations with a strong focus on turning strategy into execution. At AXA XL, he serves as Chief Sourcing and Procurement Officer, where he transformed the global procurement function, delivering merger synergies, improving spend discipline, and strengthening supplier risk management across a $1.3 billion spend base. Earlier in his career, he held a number of transformation and chief of staff roles, where he led large-scale M&A integrations across built central functions to support business performance. Please welcome to the Procurement Magazine podcast, Peter Sharoff. Hi, Peter. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to have to stop the podcast now. You've done a great job, and I'm going to be using that to promote myself from here on out. Thank you.
We like to give people the big billing when they come on the show, and obviously with a career such as storied as yours, you know, you're deserving of such a lengthy intro. I mean, could you tell me a little bit, how you got into procurement, how you got into the world?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my career has been defined by transformation and change. And you can't go very far down the road these days in transformation and change before you are working with vendors. And so a few years back when we were going through the integration of XL and Catlin, which are both insurance players, we realized that to be successful in that integration, we needed to make sure that sourcing and procurement was kind of part of the team. And that got me fairly close to it. And it was the first time I had it reporting into me after the AXA merger, where XL then was purchased by AXA. And again, I was involved in the integration. We knew that we had to create a newly integrated team, and the COO sort of asked me whether I had any interest in the space. And I honestly very rapidly jumped up and said, yes, I actually am quite fascinated. And I will say there were peers of mine who said, well, I don't know, why would you go that route? And the reason why is I really truly believe that sourcing and procurement, especially in financial services, so the backdrop is I'm in financial services, not consumer packaged goods, not manufacturing, very different dynamic. But in financial services, you know, it hasn't always gotten the respect that it deserves. Sourcing and procurement touches every part of the organization. It strongly defines the experience of that organization to clients as well as to employees. And so wouldn't of a function that does that. So that's kind of how I got there and why.
Right. What would you say your favorite thing is about working in procurement? What's the one thing that really kind of keeps you driven, keeps you going?
Oh boy, it is just the constant exposure and making a difference to all parts of the enterprise.
And obviously in your role, I mean, a lot of people must, if they ever kind of meet you at conferences, they must kind of lean on you or kind of look to you to ask questions about, you know, how to kind of better serve their own procurement function. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you kind of work to strike the balance between delivering both business value and a kind of strong internal user experience.
So, I've been reflecting on this a lot recently because it is so difficult. And I think the thing that I've come to is you need to really think of procurement as a dual mode function. On one hand, you have areas where the business just needs to move fast. It's low risk, it's low value. And what you need to be focused on is customer service, right? That is very much a customer service experience. Valued, and things need to move as quickly as they can. That's the value. On the flip side, on the other side of that barbell, are places where there is increased value to be delivered, whether that value is economic, learning for the organization, minimizing risk to the organization. And those you do need to slow down. And that shifts at that point from kind of the customer service to stakeholder management, Where are we in the process? Why does it matter? And it's very important to make sure that you're getting that dual mode model correct. Where I've seen a lot of pain points is where there's a disconnect between the people in the organization who are partnering with sourcing and procurement and what sourcing and procurement is trying to do. That's really where you start to get those horror stories of businesses complaining that the value isn't there. Why are we investing? It's what creates that disconnect.
A lot of people I speak to, especially on the podcast, talk about that kind of customer experience, that need for the service you're providing to someone to be kind of personable, and make it work for them. I was wondering, where does that come from in you? Is it something you enjoy, those kind of interpersonal relationships? Perhaps when you were a lot younger, did you work in kind of customer facing roles? Like, where does that come from?
So a couple of things. One is when I was younger, I did a lot of acting. And if you're approaching a role, what you want to do is understand the character, their motivations, where were they before, where are they going, and all of those questions you can apply in a customer service context to the person who's coming to you to make a difference, right? And so to me, it's very, very similar, right? If you're the kind of person, and I think sourcing and procurement tends to attract people like this, you want to make a positive difference. Well, then you have to meet people where they are, right? What do they view as a positive difference? And to the extent that you are able to meet those, that's where, you get that little happy path that everyone walks away and feels like a good interaction has happened.
This podcast is in partnership with Amazon Business. Amazon Business is your one-stop destination for everything your organization needs. Think of it as the Amazon you already know and love, but specifically re-engineered for the way you work. Amazon Business gives you access to business-only pricing on millions of items and quantity discounts that scale with your growth. It's about spending less time bogged down in those manual tasks and more time on what really matters. So head over to Amazon Business and make the power of Amazon work for you.
Is it difficult to kind of meet people where they are, given the immense pressure that procurement leaders are under and how volatile the market is, even more so than today, and just the pressure you're under to have those kind of good personal experience? It must, what's the kind of pressure like in that situation? How do you keep it so you keep having that really kind of positive personal relationship, given you're under this intense pressure all of the time?
So there's a model. I honestly can't remember the psychological model, but it talks about what people are like under pressure. And it's important to know this about yourself because, yeah, you're exactly right. Sourcing and procurement is constantly under time pressure, pressure for results, and some of that pressure is unreasonable. I think we would all say that happens. And so you have to know who you are. Like there are some people who just naturally, when they get under pressure, they like reaching out and creating connection, right? I love to do that. And so if I'm under pressure, but I know I've got 5 things backlogged, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give a status update to those folks. And I'm going to ask them for their input, their understanding, how do we reprioritize? But I'm going to kind of bring them into the process. But that's me. I have teammates who, when they get under pressure, they just want to lock down and do what's in front of them. And they have to set actual meeting things in their calendar that say, reach out to, your people and remind themselves to do it because it's not second nature. So is it hard? Yes. And I think this is where we probably should talk a little bit about the emergence of AI tools. I am an AI skeptic, right? I'm an AI skeptic because I've been around long enough to see blockchain come through. I'm old enough to remember when we had other tools that came through and everyone said they're going to change the universe. I think AI is different because of the ability to use AI tools that exist to create savings of 2, 3, 4% in your day. And if you those 2, 3, 4% of time, whether that is creating a presentation or polishing a presentation, whether that is doing some research for your short vendor list for an RFX or another, 4%, reinvest that into the customer service side of it. Because we know we're not getting massive capacity gains. But what I like about AI is, yeah, you got the big AI, but I'm talking about small AI. Where can you just make tiny incremental gains in things that you just do repeatedly and you're not adding a lot of value? That's really where I think there's an opportunity.
What have you kind of seen in your personal experience, the benefits of more widely available AI, and what kind of have you used it for in your kind of daily work and life?
So I'm not someone who feels the need to have AI write emails for me. I've been a writer since I was young. I can write really quickly. So I don't worry about that. But for example, when I do a presentation, one of the big things that procurement needs to do, going back to the question you mentioned earlier, is to bring people along the journey. And to do that, you're probably doing some version of a presentation at some point. Unless you are great at these things, you're going to bog down. You're going to burn more time doing it than you want, whether that is analyzing the data or putting together a presentation. And that's where the quick wins I have come in, right? Use AI to just sort of grab a trend out instead of building the pivot table and analyzing it and revising it. Now you need to be careful, right? You have hallucinations with AI. You need to make sure that you have an enclosed data set that's clean, but then you can certainly use it for that. Similarly on presentations, I'll build a presentation, but I won't spend all my time polishing it. That's where something like Copilot can do that for you. And then you just have to remember, look, great is the enemy of good, right? The Copilot may not create a great presentation, but it'll create a pretty good one off of what you've already put in, and that will be good enough for the conversation to happen.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really good way to look at it. The things that you're getting AI to support you with don't have to be, great, because they maybe can't be, because they haven't got that human interaction, that human touch that kind of elevates those things to the great level. But they can make things good and kind of save you those times, which can be reinvested into or better placed into kind of more strategic operation, or like you said, that customer facing time where those are the things that are going to kind of differentiate you from your competitors. And I was wondering, in a leadership role, people talk a lot about people, processes, and technology. How do you go about kind of striking a balance between those three to deliver change that actually sticks?
So it's exactly in that order. All right, so when you're talking about change, and it's small, medium, large, but obviously how much time you take varies by how big the change is. People have to get aligned on what's the problem statement, what needs to be solved, and what that future solution is, and to the extent that their fingerprints can be on it, great. And they need to be invested in the change, right? That has to come first, and you got to keep them informed. Then you have to make sure your process is right. Putting technology on top of a bad process never solved anything. Usually it just creates more pain for everybody. Have to get the process right, and then you can layer in the technology. Now, using that as an analogy, one of the things I've often told my team is, love their of investment into sourcing and procurement, right? We would love for the CEO of the company to say, we've invested in sales, we've invested in marketing, we invested in finance. It's time to invest in procurement. But we know that probably isn't going to happen. And so you have to make sure that even if you're getting some investment, you're using the tools. I mean, technology has moved to the point where we have a lot of tools available. Figure out what you can do with people and process, and then apply the kind of tactical technology you have access to.
What have
I
you
can't
kind of
tell. Did that get to your question?
Yeah, it did.
All right.
And what would you kind of say, what would be the best way about, if maybe perhaps people are lopsided in their thinking, perhaps have processes ahead of people, or people at the bottom and technologies ahead, what would you say are kind of the major benefits from changing that? What have kind of you seen?
Right. So if you're part of a company that is constantly throwing technology at things and it isn't working, you're not going to change the company as a whole, right? You can change your corner of it. And so for me, I've always been a big fan of trying to get people aligned by asking leading questions, right? So a great one is, what happened with the last project where you led with technology, right? Where were the problems? When you're trying to get other people to change what they're doing, you have to bring them to that change. There's an old saying, meet them where they are, right? And that's a combination of knowing where they are, but also being able to demonstrate to them where they are, right? That they are missing the process or missing the people. But there's no easy solution, right? That question you ask has so many variables to it that I'm afraid we would be on a very long podcast if we got too deeply into it.
No, of course, I appreciate you giving that kind of succinct answer to what was a very, very open question. And obviously, we spoke a lot at the start about your experience across the different roles in leadership across the company, not just only in kind of sourcing and procurement. What would you say has been the number one experience that's kind of helped you to kind of better align across procurement across the business? How has kind of working elsewhere helped you to be able to align your business with the needs of procurement?
Um, so in terms of experiences outside of procurement that have been most applicable, really, running the integration management office for the Excel Catlin deal had a lot of very common aspects, right? It's a central function like procurement. It has a lot of time pressure with bottom line results that need to be achieved, but nobody wants it. They would rather not have to deal with an integration management office. People don't understand where the value arises from a complex system of things. And so to come along with you on a journey that they don't necessarily want to go on. And in a lot of cases, that feels like procurement. It isn't always the case. Sometimes procurement has raving fans. Generally, when it's more reactive and you want it to be more proactive, you have to bring stakeholders along for that journey. And I think the number one sort of learning that I had coming out of that was the need was the need to meet them where they are again. And I'm going to just do a little side note. So I used to work with a COO, and this is a guy who ran major 1,000-person organizations named Myron Hendry. Great guy. And so Myron loved to focus on what he called just one development. Every year, he would just give you one thought for your career development. The idea being it can't focus on. And one year we heard that he just wanted us to focus on one word. He had picked one word that we all had to reflect on, and everybody's was different. And so everybody would get ready for the meeting, wondering what Myron was going to say. And so I sat down with him and he looked me deep in the eye because Myron was very good at creating this sense of gravitas and importance. And he said, Peter, I want you to focus on the word guitar. And I went, I don't know what you are talking about. All right. So it has the value of being memorable. The guitar principle, as I've come to call it, is this. He said, look, you understand, in this case, it was the same problem. You understand this function better than any of the people you need to move. So when you, like Jimmy, a bunch of third graders how to play the guitar, believe me, he didn't dump all of his knowledge at once, right? He would give them a little, and as they got better, he would give them a little more, and as they got better, he would give them a little more. That roll out sourcing and procurement across an organization is you don't try to dump all of it at once. It's an iterative process. You figure out where they are and you give them 5% more or 10% more, and you move them along that cycle because they're never going to understand procurement as deeply as the experts who are in it. You don't need them to. You need them to learn to appreciate it. And so I think the guitar principle is probably the number one thing I would point to.
I mean, that's a great analogy and a great way to think about it. And I mean, now you can call yourself the Jimi Hendrix of procurement, which must be.
I see. We should have had that in that intro. That would have been very impressive.
Exactly, the Jimi Hendrix of procurement. So, talking to you, Peter, it's very clear that you're very personable, very easy to get on with. But obviously, procurement has a bit of a reputation of being, they're the people in the company who say no, they kind of bore themselves off, they're difficult to engage with, difficult to be on their level, but it's clear that you've made that where you've worked, that hasn't been the case for your procurement teams. So how do you create a procurement function, which people actually want to engage with?
This is where when I started with that kind of, you have to listen, you have to bring them along in the stakeholder management. This is going to sound so naive. I truly fundamentally believe that the vast majority of people in organizations do want better. They have their pressures and they're going to respond to their pressures. But if you can involve them in understanding why things take the amount of time they do and give them some modicum of control as to how they might be able to make it faster, their experience of it gets better, even if the actual cycle time doesn't change. And so in procurement, we run multiple which we don't control. And that's what makes our function so very frustrating is we feel as if we're blamed for things that aren't our fault. But what you have to understand is that you're there to run the end-to-end process. And that means you want to drive alignment across all those functions. So yeah, there are structural things you need to do with legal, with information security, data protection, and so on to make that an efficient process. But it also means you're the front person, I guess getting back to Jimi Hendrix, for that process to the rest of the organization. And so when I and the team have been successful, where I think it generally has been more successful is that we make it clear, we understand what they view as a problem. We get them to help understand where it is and give them control. Hey, you don't want to take as long, obfuscate the data. Or you don't want to take as long, well, then you can't share PII, right? There are things that you can do. And then there are things that are inescapable and you have to make sure they understand it will take some time. And as the front person, get them involved. I don't know about you, but when I go to a place like Disney, right? One of the early changes they made, people were on lines. It felt like it took 3 hours and 4 hours. People complained. They made one simple change. They put up those TV things that tell you where you are in your line and about how long it will take. And when they did the surveys to how people felt much better. The line was not any shorter. It didn't move any faster. But they had some knowledge to make them feel comfortable about what was to come next. And they had the belief in control. If it's too long, I can leave. And so it's a similar principle to what you want to do with sourcing and procurement in the organization. Now, do you want to have some short lines so you can jump on Space Mountain quickly? Yes, there should be those. That's why I call it dual mode. But, sometimes you're going to have that popular item and it just takes time. Keep people informed, give them a sense of control.
I mean, that's as well, like you said, that's why the fast track line exists. You can
Yep.
pay a bit more, and those things that are more urgent can be pushed forward if you're willing to make the sacrifices. If you're willing to go on by yourself and not with your friends and family, then you can jump ahead. So I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, and it's really interesting that perception has changed. If given just a little bit of information, if you know where you are, how long you have to wait, then like you said, with that knowledge, that person can make a more knowledgeable decision and can move forward with it. So, and another thing as one we could look at is, how would you recommend, people help to give procurement a voice to highlight the good it does,
So there's kind of two things in my mind that have to happen, and both require a plan to make happen. One is, of course, being able to show up and provide some perspective, right? So that is making sure that you are having those quarterly or semi-annual touch bases. It is making sure there is a forum for you. In most organizations that I've been a part of, procurement is so tired of getting beaten about the head. The last thing they want to do is go and have a group discussion. And yet sometimes you have to go and have a group discussion. Now you have to work at it. You have to make sure it's valuable, but you kind of have to make sure you're out there. So that's one bit. The other bit, however, and this takes more time, is asking really good questions, right? Sometimes getting people to say what you need them to say will help and help them understand much better. And so, for example, if I'm working with marketing and marketing wants to bring in AI, I want to have done my homework so that I'm not the dumb person at the table asking them to educate me, right? I'm not going to be an expert, and I absolutely respect their expertise. But if I can just get one good question that makes them think, huh, I hadn't thought of it that way in a meeting, that's a huge win. Because then as that adds up over time, you've gotten into thinking they want your opinion, and they're much more likely to ask you and get you involved early enough. That is a very soft way of going about it. There's no metrics to easily track it, but that's those are the two things you need to be looking at.
And what about you personally? What's the kind of proudest achievement in your procurement career, and how have you voiced that to the company at large?
So my proudest achievement within procurement probably has been making sure to align the team around delivering value to the stakeholders, right? Just that moment where a stakeholder emails you and says, either that went through faster than I ever thought, or it didn't, that was not fast, but boy, we got good benefit. When I get those, and there's only so often you're going to get those, even if people are happy, they often don't reach out and tell you. That always makes me happy. And so I guess ultimately the proudest moment would have been, all companies do these employee surveys, right? Or do your employees feel valued and the rest? When we got the employee survey back and my team said, yeah, we feel very, very valued, that's probably my proudest moment because it meant not only that I'm treating them well, but the organization as a whole has started treating them well.
Perfect. Now, Peter, something we like to do here on the Procurement Magazine podcast is we like to get leaders posing questions to one another. So from our previous speaker, they wanted to know, what's the global challenge affecting your industry in procurement and supply chain, and how do you mitigate this?
Yeah, that's not a small question. What is the global challenge? Time. I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to, right? We have geopolitical risk going through the roof that's creating supply chain risk. We have cyber going through the roof that's creating both supply chain risk, legal risk, regulatory risk. We've got massive changes in technology, not only for us, but for others. So I hate to bail, but I mean the enemy that we need to be sort of constantly fighting is time. And the way you deal with that, at least in my view, is by constantly getting rid of the things you don't have to do. People have a habit of clinging to things they did in the past just because they're comfortable. So you have to constantly be getting rid of those. You have to be making, this goes back to the little AI efficiency tools. We're sometimes all waiting for that grand workflow that will solve our problems. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. If you have a good process and you can make individual pieces of it better, it's generally going to help. Now, the process experts can tell that aside. That's a different podcast. And then where you can, you need to make sure that you are on a prioritization base with folks. That prioritization discussion is always the difficult one, but you have to do it. But fundamentally, I know that the person who asked that probably wants me to talk about either AI or regulatory risk, but it really is the time factor. It's the point you brought up very eloquently, right? Everybody is constantly stretched for time. How do we deal with everything that is coming after us? And so, given the challenges sourcing and procurement has, getting respect as an enterprise function, demonstrating our value, getting the necessary investment, that's what we have to be mindful, because that's what everybody's struggling with.
So, Peter, thank you so much for answering that question. Now, can I get you to pay it forward, and can you pose a question for our next speaker, please?
Throughout your procurement career, what is the one funniest episode that you've had to deal with?
Funniest. I like that. I haven't had that yet. So I'm really looking forward to that and present that to our next speaker. So thank you so much.
I know I'll tune in.
So just to finish up with, I've got 3 questions for you. They're quick fire. I want you to answer them with the thing that comes first to mind.
Okay.
The first question is, what's the most exciting thing about the future of procurement?
That we are truly becoming an economy, a networked economy. And so all the skills people have developed, I think there's going to be more value on them. And I don't know about you, I want all the people I work with to feel like they're really, really valued. And I think that's coming.
Yeah, very important. What is one thing people still get wrong about procurement?
That it's about just buying stuff.
You're not the first person to say that. I don't expect you to be the last either.
No, I don't think so.
And finally, what is one piece of technology we rely on now which will be obsolete in a year?
Email.
Email. I think
maybe not a year, but email is asynchronous, and again, things are moving so quickly. The time pressure is so great. Already, I'm seeing team chats, people acting more on things like Slate. I mean, the group to group conversations have to go up.
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being on. It's been great to meet you, and I wish you great conversations in all the future podcasts.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Procurement Magazine podcast. And we'll see you next time.